The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Meeple Realty and Tasty Minstrel Games. Check out all their awesome products at meeplerealty.com and playtmg.com.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, it's the Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board, card, and occasionally role-playing games. Today, the Dukes are joined by Duke City locals Jeremy, Nick, and Rory. We review Fantasy Flight's Arkham Horror the card game. Then, we look back at our review of Shakespeare in our Dukes Double-Take. Finally, we discuss what kinds of games we like to end a game night with. And now, the Dukes of Dice. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And Nick. And Jeremy.
And Rory.
Oh, man, there's so many of us. This is crazy. This is totally crazy. So this is episode 129, Much Cthulhu About Nothing, which named courtesy Jake Bach over on our Board Game Geek Guild and Shakespeare in our Dukes Double-Take. So great name. If you don't know what that's about, go on over to our guild number 2008. Every week in our Dukes on Deck, we look at the games we're going to talk about coming up, and everyone gets to help name the episodes. So check that out. So guys, welcome.
Awesome to be here.
So for those that don't know, or maybe just tuning in for the first time, or haven't been with us for a while, Alex is on hiatus until mid-April or May or June. Who knows? He might just stay over there indefinitely. I don't know. But this is one of the weeks where we're having some of our local buddies from our weekly game group over to help us out. So in a second, we're going to get to know a little bit more about all of you. I'm excited for that. You guys ready to do this?
Yeah. Yep. I'm ready.
Let's do it.
So real quick, we will talk about a couple bits of show business. We have a Patreon account. It's patreon.com/Dukes of Dice. And if you want to go over there and help support the show, we would greatly appreciate it. We do something every other month. We have a live Q&A on our YouTube channel with some other media or industry insider. Coming up on February 9th, we're going to have our friends Jake and Danielle from the Draft Mechanic podcast. So we're going to do a live Q&A with them. That's going to be a lot of fun. In fact, I just heard from Jake. He is sending me my trophy for being the winner of the first annual Fantasy Board Game League. Originally, Rory, by the way, Rory's from Empire Board Game Library. Little plug there.
Glad to be here.
It's $5 every mention, by the way.
Great.
Okay.
Let's not talk about that.
No, you're paying me $5.
Let's definitely not talk about that.
Oh. So speaking of Empire Board Game Library, the plan, that's 10, was to actually put the trophy at Empire, but then I decided I'm going to keep it here because I've got the studio. So we'll see.
Always has a home in Empire.
So speaking of YouTube, we have some increased production over there if you want to check out some reviews. I also did our first January recap where I talked about all of the different Dukes of Dice productions, including the podcasts and things on the YouTube channel itself. I asked for some help to name the segments because we kind of do our Dukes on Deck on the guild, and then we have our Dukes Double-Take. So we kind of use D words to I don't know, be alliterative. Did I say that right? Alliterative? Alliteration, alliterative. But yeah, if you want to help figure out the name for that monthly recap that I'll be doing, you can go on over to the YouTube channel and comment there. And hey, while you're at it, subscribe. So yeah.
I subscribed.
Thank you.
I subscribed as well.
Okay. Rory from Empire Board Game Library, did you subscribe?
No comment.
Do you even? So one thing that we're doing, so on Patreon, a Slack message group that all the different patrons can use. But I also did one for the locals that are helping me out while Alex is gone. And Rory, you just got on Slack today, or was that a lie? Were you lying?
I may or may not have been telling the truth.
Because I can check right now.
I'm signed up.
You're signed up?
But I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't got into it.
All right.
But I'm here on time.
It's been a pretty useful tool to be able to converse with you guys, both in one-on-one conversations, setting things up, and for planning what we're going to play on our Meetup Wednesdays. So it's been a pretty useful collaborative tool so far.
I do plan on being more diligent in the future with Slack.
Okay. You're not going to slack off on Slack?
I'm not going to slack off.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about some games we've been playing. But first, what we did 2 weeks ago when we had Matt and David on is we did Get to Know a Gamer so that all of you out there listening can get a feel, get some context for these buddies of mine that are helping me out. So you can kind of know when they're talking about a game if it's something they would typically like or whatnot.
Tonight, Sean is joined by local gamers from the Duke City. Let's meet them in the Gamer Spotlight. First up is Nick.
So probably my experience in the gaming world started about 20 years ago with CCGs, like a lot of other folks. So Magic was the obvious choice, and I branched out to a bunch of other lesser-known CCGs, Jihad, Netrunner, a few others. And then after a couple years, little dabbling into pencil and paper role-playing games, and then once it was less easy to get those role-playing tabletop game groups together, I branched out into doing board games. Started with Catan, like a lot of you, and then realized there was more out there than Catan. And I've been gaming with the Dukes of Dice for about 18 months now.
Has it been 18 months?
Almost.
Yeah, about. Okay. All right. Very cool. Well, good to have you along, Nick.
Appreciate being here.
Next up, we have Jeremy Wright.
I'm Jeremy. I'm a Albuquerque native. Been playing games since I was probably about 10. Cut my teeth on Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition. And kind of became a video gamer through high school. Didn't really play tabletop games until after I got through graduate school. And since then, I've been playing games here with local groups. Met up with the Dukes at a fundraising day and been playing with Sean ever since.
Oh, yeah. I forgot that was the first time at another store that we won't mention, Rory.
Yeah, we played some Zolkin.
Oh, we did play Zolkin. Yeah, that's right. Very cool.
And rounding out tonight's Duke City Gamers is Rory Veranda.
All right, so my name is Rory, and I'm quite a bit older than everyone in the group, so obviously I started off with some Dungeons & Dragons for my gaming, and then went into some collectible card game stuff, and then mostly heavy board game, Euro games is what I love right now. I like long, heavy games, and that's where I'm at now.
And you own Empire Board Game Library.
And I do own Empire Board Game Library, that's correct.
We're at $55 right now.
Oh, excellent.
Just letting you know.
Let's get ready to podcast.
By the way, I forgot to mention Jeff last time. Jeff Rademacher did that voiceover, which is really cool. And I think it just adds a little something. So thanks, Jeff. Really appreciate the help with that. All right. Well, cool. I'm glad you guys are here along for the ride. So yeah, let's talk about some games. Jeremy, what did you get to the table recently?
Well, I just got a Kickstarter delivery of Herbaceous. I think I'm saying that right.
Yeah, I think so.
It's a cute little game, illustrated by Beth Sobel. Which,
Yeah.
She did Viticulture and some of the Stonemaier games, and I think a bunch of other stuff too. But
yeah, she's really good. I like her art style.
yeah, and it looks really great on the table. Lots of colorful artwork depicting the herbs. And it's a quick play, about 15 minutes, plays 4 people, and there's maybe a little bit of depth there, but it's not too complicated. So it's a nice kind of filler and a family game.
Okay. So is that who you typically want to play it with?
Yeah, I think so. It wouldn't really engross gamers
Okay.
much beyond a filler.
But the art's really solid.
The art's totally there.
Okay. Are you going to bring it around on a Wednesday?
Yeah, I brought it 2 weeks ago, and I'll probably bring it this week.
Okay. I'm really interested to try it. At least, I mean, if nothing else, I think the art's really solid.
Yeah, and I got to say that they really delivered on their Kickstarter nice and early, and I was happy to get that in. So, yeah, that was nice. It's a game called Herbaceous by Eduardo Baraf.
Very cool. Nick, what about you?
So I'll talk about a recent Kickstarter fulfillment of Xenoshyft Dreadmire. So I think it fulfilled for me probably about 3 weeks ago, and I'm still kind of going through the unboxing, layout, and analyze what showed up stage. So unlike Jeremy's example, this was not a prompt Kickstarter fulfillment from CMON. In fact, when I went to Gen Con last year, I saw they had copies of it at the booth ready for sale, but the Kickstarter had yet to fulfill, and then 2 or 3 months later, the Kickstarter fulfilled. Now, granted, a lot of the Kickstarter exclusives weren't for sale there, so that was nice to see them come in. So in unboxing this, the box was about the same size as the base set of Xenoshyft. So it had a full set of 3 waves of enemy cards and all the player cards. So it looked like, initially my impression was it going to be able to be integrated into Xenoshyft Dreadmire, but it looks like it'll play better as a standalone.
Oh, interesting.
So one of the mechanics I think they went in and fixed was a lot of the purchasable cards have a scalable element based on the wave they're used in.
Nice.
So as opposed to being stuck with those wave 1 equipment cards you drafted when they were cheap in wave 1, now they have a plus W power, where W is the current wave you're on. So it looks like they kind of fixed that element. They also seem to have added an element of the ability to thin your deck. So in the original Xenoshyft, it was almost impossible to remove cards from your deck, and it seems like there are ways to do that. In addition, the Immolation, I think is the name of the little adventure pack that came with it, is a separate box set of just an enemy deck, and it adds this mechanic of, you're on a volcano planet, so it adds this mechanic of what is the fire level. I forget the term they call it. And that changes the power level of the monsters when you encounter them, and they spend those fire points to do attacks to your troops. So that's another mechanic that they threw in there that wasn't present in the base Xenoshyft. Dreadmire added the mechanic of changing weather. So you have both equipment and enemies that might get better or worse based on the weather during the current attack wave.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So I think there's a little bit more replayable value here. And it seems like they fixed several of the, I won't call them mechanical problems, but little things that became annoying after repeating parts from the initial Xenoshyft.
So I know you're kind of just exploring what's in there and haven't really played it, but if you're going to approach it more as a standalone, in your mind, do you think there'll be a place to have both in your collection?
So what I think you might experiment doing is taking all of the equipment and character cards from either Dreadmire or the base Xenoshyft, Onslaught, and mixing them with the enemies from one or the other. So sort of don't mix the enemies together, don't mix the player cards together. Use the player deck from Onslaught and one of the enemy deck from either Immolation or Dreadmire. I think Immolation with that expansion. It's something to do with Fire Planet.
Yeah, I got the Kickstarter too, and I've actually had an opportunity to play.
Oh, okay.
And I really appreciated the weather mechanic. That adds a lot of replayability in my mind. And I found that the player cards from Dreadmire are probably preferable over the ones from Onslaught. But I've been actually thinking about getting the Onslaught game now so that I have another enemy deck.
Huh.
That would, if I was going to use something from Onslaught, it would be the enemy deck, not the player card.
So I might know someone who's selling a copy of Onslaught at the Gamer Garage sale that is going to be 2 days before this episode drops.
At Empire Board Game Library.
$60. Yeah. So so I really liked Xenoshyft, but I don't think it's going to come out like very much for me for whatever reason. I didn't back Dreadmire because I wasn't that impressed with the Onslaught Kickstarter exclusives. Because a lot of times if I'm going to spend that kind of money on a game, and especially if it's a CMON game, I'm expecting some Kickstarter exclusives that are going to be really juicy. And they didn't do a whole lot for me, which is why I avoided Dreadmire. And I'm interested, I might even pick up Dreadmire at some point, but I think I'm definitely getting rid of Onslaught. It's down here somewhere in the basement. So that will be available on Saturday at the garage sale.
So if there's one more thing I'll mention about that. I think this was a Gen Con exclusive that I picked up at Gen Con that was a single scenario pack for Xenoshyft Onslaught.
Okay.
So they called it the 11th hour. So it had you set up a very specific set of equipment cards that were available and stack the enemy deck in a specific way. So it said you're playing through 3 waves just like this with a very specific setup, and it had cards in there to make that happen. That didn't seem to be available as a Kickstarter add-on with Dreadmire. It was just and it didn't look like it was quite retail packaged, but it was just a kind of a one-shot, a brief way to play Xenoshyft as opposed to having to play through 9 waves.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to trying that. I think that might be an easier way to get this game to the table as opposed to getting ready to suffer through 9 waves that may overstay its welcome on the table.
Yeah. Okay.
So
yeah, I'm looking forward to trying Dreadmire.
Yeah, I don't think you missed anything with the Kickstarter either.
Yeah.
The exclusives were full art boss cards, which are cool, but they don't really change the game mechanically. Don't bring any replay value.
So one of the Kickstarter exclusives they did add was the faction cards double size. So it doesn't necessarily change the play, but it might the presentation on the table and the ability to read the abilities a little bit easier.
Yeah, the big cards are cool, but not necessary.
Right. So that was a recap of the Kickstarter fulfillment of Xenoshyft Dreadmire, along with some of the other exclusives that came with it.
So what I've recently been playing is we put a group together to play Seafall, and it has got some mixed reviews. I think it's a great game. I really enjoy it a lot. We're about to finish Pandemic Legacy, so I was hoping to get one finished before we start the other one, but I have 2 crossover groups on it. It's been, like I said, it's been a lot of fun. It's sort of a 4X head-to-head with exploration. It's been a really fun game.
So what can you tell us without spoiling stuff about, because is it Merchants and Marauders Legacy? That's been my impression.
I know it's not a pick up and deliver style game. There are some elements, but it's mainly like you go out and you adventure with your ship and you discover islands, and in those islands things happen. I don't want to give any spoilers to the game. Mm-hmm. But then there's also like a war element, which kind of adds more of a 4X element to the game, which I think is really cool. And it also it's head to head. It's not cooperative. And I like that. I know there's been some discussion about runaway victory point problems with that game, but we haven't experienced that yet. We've all stayed pretty even. And I think we have played 6 games so far.
How many games is it supposed to be or to take to finish this?
I'm not sure, but I think Chris mentioned that it was 18.
I think the average is 15 to 18.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. So you're about a third of the way through, give or take.
Yeah, and I've been liking it a lot. It's been a really good game.
So can you like focus on one aspect over another?
No, what happens is that there's different things, there's different ways to win on this game. There's like goal driven things that you can do where you've got different goals that you can try to achieve. You can try to get it through war, you can try to get it through exploration. So during every game we're playing, there's different objectives that come up. So you really have to change your gameplay quite a bit in it. And that's one thing I definitely liked about it a lot.
Okay. So should I try it?
I think it's really good.
Yeah.
I know it's getting some mixed reviews, but I have to say I've been really enjoying it.
So I know it's not Merchants and Marauders, but if I don't like Merchants and Marauders, am I going to like this game?
I mean, you're almost categorizing it as a nautical game experience.
Isn't that what it is?
It is. It's definitely that, but it's good. But Merchants and Marauders is excellent too. So
yeah, but I don't like it.
But you don't like pick up and deliver.
I don't like pick up and deliver.
This is not. I would not call this a pick up and deliver game.
But you can do pick up and deliver.
You can. It's just one aspect of the game.
But the same thing with Merchants and Marauders. It's not just pick up and deliver. There's fighting and there's missions and or expeditions or whatever.
There's a lot more going. There's a lot more going on in Seafall.
Well, sure. All right.
What about combat? Because that's a problem with Merchants and Marauders.
Oh my god, it's so terrible.
The combat in Seafall is really good.
It doesn't take like an hour of dice rolling.
No. It's really tight mechanics on the combat, and I like the combat a lot. It's risky. It feels like sea combat. It's a really good mechanic. You really get rewarded well for the combat. It's definitely a good aspect of the game. I mean, I really would put this as a 4X game.
Okay.
Rory, how many players are you playing your playthrough with for Seafall?
We're doing 4 players.
4 players? So this is set up where you need the same 4 players every time. If one person's missing, can you play with 3 and the other person jump back in or not?
I suppose you could, but I think it would not really balance the game right, because the problem is it's head to head. So you're tracking your victory points through as you're playing the game. So if one person's missing in the game, he's going to go back in victory points so far that he would probably never be able to catch up.
Does it feel to you like 4 players is the right number?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I don't know what the max player count is. I would imagine it's...
I thought it was 4.
Yeah.
I think it plays 5.
Does it play 5?
Yeah. I also picked up a copy, but I haven't gotten to the table yet because I'm still trying to build my group for it. But I'm not going to invite Sean.
Yeah, don't invite
Legacy
me.
Games.
And because it's... Yeah, that too. How dare you?
He has a podcasting schedule.
It's really difficult. Like, I'm super excited for Legacy Season or Pandemic Legacy Season 2, but I'm just like, that's not going to happen.
You should maybe finish the first season before you make that decision.
Yeah.
What month are you on again?
We're on like October.
Oh, okay.
But then Alex went to the other side of the world, so you can't put this on me. Yeah, why am I getting blamed?
You're here, he's there?
That's a good point.
Anyway, that's Seafall.
So for Dukes of Dice date night, which involved just Raquel and I, we went over to Empire Board Game Library, which is what we typically do on Dukes of Dice date night.
$75.
This is great. This is gonna.
Yeah, I'm gonna. We have a good weekend.
So I was in the mood to play some card games because I had just recorded for the second time with Mike Fitzgerald, and so when we got there, we played some Hero Realms, which I love. But then I said, "Wait a second! I don't think Raquel has played any of the mystery Rummy games, and in fact, I've only ever played Jack the Ripper." So Rory, you've got Escape from Alcatraz, and you have, I think, the Al Capone one.
I think I have all of them.
I think you might. So I pulled out Escape from Alcatraz, and I went through the rules real quick, and there was enough similarity to, say, Wyatt Earp or to Jack the Ripper. There was a pretty easy game to pick up, but basically it's a rummy game. So what you're trying to do, or what you're doing rather, is you're drawing a card, and then drawing 2 cards actually, and then you're able to play cards in melds. So you're trying to match cards of suits. And there's basically 7 different suits, but it's themed. So it's not just a regular suit, but it's a type of escape. So it's sawing through the bars or doing a prison ride or something like that. So you're able to play these cards. And then at the end of a turn, you have to discard a card. So that's the rummy mechanic, right? Draw some amount of cards, play out some cards, and then you have to be able to discard a card. And in a rummy game, that's always the really tense decision of, oh, what card do I put out? Because I know they might want this particular color or whatever. But what's really cool, when you're able to play out melds or whenever you're able to play out cards that add on someone else's meld, you get to draw, I forget what it's called, but there's some kind of event card, which is going to give you some more cards to draw or possibly let you steal cards. And eventually what you're trying to do is you're trying to have enough information on a particular escape attempt. You want 8 of a card between you and the other players. And when you're able to then play that 8th card, you can claim it, but you have to have the matching convict in hand. And that's going to give you some points. Now, everyone else can keep all of their cards. So let's say that I had 5 of the red cards and Raquel had 3 of the red cards. So as I've played the 8, I also have the red convict in hand. So I get to keep all 5 of my cards that are worth 2 points. Plus the convict is worth 10. Raquel gets to keep her 3 cards, and maybe she has like a wild convict when they're only worth 5 points. So you do that until either you go through the deck or one of you discards your last card. You add up all the points in your pile. It's first to 100. Man, I love the Mystery Rummy series.
I agree. I think it just works. The Rummy mechanic it's a lot of fun. I think it's like a small card game that should be in everyone's collection.
Yeah.
It's just a really good go-to fun after game, and it's got enough complexity to really come back on the table and have a lot of replayability.
Yeah, so I don't technically own any of them. I have Wyatt Earp, which isn't technically part of the series, but it's a similar mechanic. And so I'm really eager to try the other ones because Jack the Ripper and Escape from Alcatraz were just different enough. Like there were some interesting mechanical differences that it makes me excited to try the other ones too. So, but that was just a byproduct of having Mike Fitzgerald on the show. I'm like, oh, I want to play Mystery Rummy. So that's pretty cool. So that is Mystery Rummy Escape from Alcatraz. And that's a look what we played. We're going to head on over to a very brief news. All right, so this week we're going to do a quick news segment just talking about a Kickstarter game. We're talking about Dragon Brew, which is currently on Kickstarter. This has 29 days to go at the time of recording. It ends on March 3rd. And this is a game that I actually got to play in playtesting and was also sent a pre-production copy just the other week by Daniel George, who was the designer. This is a really interesting action selection kind of worker placement game with some card drafting where you are a fantasy race. You're like your dark elves or your wizards, centaurs, giants, etc. But you're brewing beer. So Brewmancia is the kingdom, and you've basically you've done away with war, and instead all problems are solved through the brewing of beer, which is kind of a weird thematic thing because there's plenty of like brewing games and wine games, but now there's kind of this fantasy take on it too. So that makes it interesting. So it's got kind of a Rochester style card drafting, but you're actually paying for the cards that are out there. And there's some engine building because you're trying to take grain, build grain or harvest grain, I guess, and then turn it into other ingredients and then get other ingredients to then brew these particular types of beers based on what the particular judges that year are looking for. And there's some interesting tempo is not the right word, but basically you might try and brew the second best beer and not the best beer because you resolve the judges in order. And maybe the first judge is worth 3 points and the next judge is worth 4 points. So you want to try and play around with that. If you want to know some more about this game, I actually did a Kickstarter preview video, the very first preview video we've done, and that's up on the YouTube channel. So you can see the pre-production components, you can see all the art, and I take about 15 minutes to go through gameplay to check it out.
Does the winner eventually get to Bud Light?
No, Rory, no.
So I will say that looking at the contents of the game, just from a component standpoint versus the price point, that the price point there is really good.
Yeah, so it's $49 for the base game,
including domestic shipping.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a big thing with Kickstarter. You got to look at is whether they're tagging the shipping on in the price or not. And to me, looking at what's in that component wise, the value is definitely there.
Well, it looks like it's delivering in October of this year, so that's also nice when you see a quick turnaround on a Kickstarter.
Well, my understanding, the art is all done, and that's usually a huge hang-up. I'm waiting on a game called Era. It's some sort of like Civ card game that's been around for like 2.5 years because like none of the art's done. And then he was like, oh, and by the way, I haven't actually playtested these decks, and it's ridiculous. But anyway, that's not the case here. Sorry, I got sidetracked because I got annoyed reading all the comments in that one the other day. But yeah, it's pretty much ready to go to the printer. All the playtesting's been done. So Daniel really made sure to, hit the ground running with this Kickstarter.
It seems like something that should be intuitive to folks running Kickstarters, but it's not timed to coincide delivery with the Chinese New Year, which is pretty much upon us. So nothing is coming out of China production right now because of that. So seeing that they're not overlapping into that season at all, that's encouraging.
Well, that seemed to be the common thread I kept hearing from a bunch of different companies. Oh, it's all right. We're going to get everything to print right before the Chinese New Year.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
It's like, yeah, that's what everyone's trying to do. So that's not going to work.
Yeah, it looks like this one's close to funding here, Sean. So
yes, currently at the time of recording, it's $17,000 of its $25,000 goal. So I think that's gonna happen.
And it looks like their stretch goals are spaced 5K apart, so several of those will probably get hit for bonus races and an upgraded scenario, I think, is in there.
And so I got to play the bonus race, some of the bonus races, because he sent the first time around, back during playtesting, he sent out a bunch of those different bonus races. And so they do some interesting stuff. And that's kind of what's cool is there's a lot of replayability here and variability because all of the races act just a little bit differently. They're all pretty well balanced, but they all have some sort of really thematically ingrained ability that makes sense. Like, for example, the giants are really good at mashing grain into warts. So they get to do that more often than others. Whereas like the wizards, they let you use other players' spell cards, which makes a certain amount of sense. So anyway, go check out Dragon Brew. And yeah, if you want to check out more, go and check out the Kickstarter page. Also, you can see there our preview video. So if you want some more information, definitely do that. So that's going to do it for our look at Kickstarter, and that's going to do it for our very brief news. The holidays are over, and hopefully we all got all the board games we wanted. We've read the rules, we've punched the cardboard, and for some of us, we've put all the components into little baggies. Little baggies, people! Our loved ones took time and energy to find out what games we're craving, and we're going to show our appreciation by putting their gifts into baggies? We could do better than that. Instead, check out all the amazing, high-quality, laser-cut inserts from MeepleRealty.com. These inserts are engineered to streamline the setup and breakdown of some of your favorite games, as well as facilitate the gameplay. Treat those games in your life right with a Meeple Realty insert. They've got inserts for some of the hottest titles from 2016, including Scythe, Terraforming Mars, Millennium Blade, Star Wars Rebellion, and many more. I've been talking with the Meeple Realty crew, and they have some hot new inserts ready to come out in 2017. Oh boy, I cannot wait to tell you about them. Go to MeepleRealty.com to find exactly what you're looking for to store your games in style.
Be sure to use promo code Dukes of Dice MR17 for 10% off your entire order. That's Dukes of Dice M as in Mike, R as in Romeo 17, all one word.
This week, the Dukes are looking at Fantasy Flight's 107th game set in their Lovecraft universe. Okay, maybe not that many, but pretty close. This time, we're constructing decks, Lovecrafting it up, and then gaining some XP to improve our decks for the next go. It's Arkham Horror, the card game. All right, so Arkham Horror, the card game. This is the full Fantasy Flight treatment, but in a living card game setting or living card game style. And I don't know that we're going to talk too much about the rule mechanics here, other than you're building a deck with a bunch of different colors of cards that are different spheres of influence. There's like a law and like an arcane. So it's basically like red, yellow, green, purple, blue. Each investigator has their own deck building requirements and some special cards that they get to add in. And so there's a nice deck construction element here. Ultimately, what you're doing is you're taking 3 actions a turn, and you can play cards from hand, paying resources. You can gain some resources. You can draw some extra cards. You can fight monsters that are going to show up. And the big thing is, I think, investigating, because you're going to need some clues. Like any good Lovecraft FFG game, you need clues to do whatever you need to do, right? So the other thing is that there's a mythos phase, because again, it's a Fantasy Flight game set in the Lovecraft universe, so it has a mythos phase. And this is when you're going to draw some cards from the encounter deck that are going to be some monsters that are going to come attack you, or they're going to have some effect that you have to test against. And it's also going to potentially advance the doom, because again, that's another common element in all of these games. There's some kind of doom track, which is going to advance the agenda of the particular scenario that you're playing. That's going to change something fundamental about the game. Ideally, what you're trying to do is you're trying to pump enough clues, usually, because there's going to be differences in scenarios, into the different acts that are going to advance and give you, are going to move this whole story along. The only other thing I'd say before we kind of jump into our discussion is that whenever you're making a test, and there's 4 different attributes you're going to test against, there's like agility and fighting and will and investigation. What's really neat is you take your score plus some modifiers, and there's some ability where card play can boost those modifiers, or you can add weapons or abilities or allies to also boost those abilities, or you can have your teammates help you out by discarding cards from hand. But then you pull from a chaos bag, which has these tokens in it that act as some sort of modifier. And what's cool is that changes from scenario to scenario or campaign to campaign, and you can adjust the difficulty up or down. But that's, I think, all you need for a very basic rules overview. It's a pretty intuitive card game in most senses, although there are some corner cases and some hangups, and you'll spend some time in the rule book. But yeah, so what do you guys think generally of Arkham Horror, the card game?
So fully cooperative. I don't know if you mentioned that in the explanation,
Yeah.
but so it's the base box is 1 to 2 players, but it'll play up to 4 players with another base set. So
Maybe.
well, maybe that's a good point.
It's a bring your own deck sort of situation, I think, really.
Well, that's the question. And I think we'll come to that because I want it to be that. I want it to be bring your own deck, but I don't know. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll talk some about that, I think.
So I think initial impression of the rules is they're pretty straightforward. It's a relatively easy teach in terms of understanding your options on your turn, in terms of understanding what you need to do to advance the scenario. And again, without talking specifics of scenario, you're in general talking about competing with an advancing doom track with the ability of the investigators as a group to gather clues. So you'll see that some investigators are better at doing things than others. So you may have one investigator who's really good at gathering clues based on both their base attributes and the cards in their deck, but you may have another investigator who's really good at fighting monsters. So developing that synergy amongst the group, I think, is a really interesting aspect of this cooperative nature. So it's not like we each need to be the best investigator.
Right.
We need to, as a group, be able to tackle a wide variety of challenges.
I think it's important to note that this isn't a deck building game. This is really a living card game.
Yeah.
So you build your deck ahead of time. It's a constructed deck.
Deck construction.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think people throw around deck building in reviewing, and I think it's important to note what it is here.
Right. Yeah. I definitely like to make sure deck building is the concept of you are literally building your deck throughout the course of gameplay. Deck construction is your Netrunner, your Magic the Gathering, where you're building a pre-constructed deck before you actually go into the game.
Right. And there is almost a deck building aspect in the scenario or the campaign.
Yeah.
So that between scenarios, you get some experience points, and you can spend those experience points buying better versions of the cards in your deck or new cards and adding them to your deck. But you're always limited to a 30 count deck size.
Right.
And each investigator has a limiting factor of what type of cards they can buy into their deck. So even though 2 characters might be able to buy arcane cards, one character can buy level 0 through 5 arcane cards into their deck, but another investigator might only be able to buy 0 through 3.
Right.
So it sounds initially like you wouldn't be competing for the same cards to upgrade into your deck, but we found that with a couple of player counts and a couple of mixes of characters, we're both kind of both or multiple people are wanting to buy the same upgraded cards. So without multiple copies of a base set, you run into that, well, there's only one more of this upgraded card in there, and both Rory and I are trying to buy it. So that kind of leads into the discussion of how many base sets do you really need to play this game?
Sure.
And as far as the player cards go, for the different class varieties, there's only one of each in the base box, and you can have up to 2 of a named card in your deck. So if you have 2 that use the rogue type cards, you might actually want 4 base copies of the game.
One thing too about the game that I think is important to mention is it really does feel like a legacy style game. I think you need to play the scenarios in order to build up your decks as you're playing along, because as we experienced on our play, I felt like we went from the first scenario into the 4th scenario, and it was difficult. And I feel like maybe if we would have just gone scenario to scenario, we could have built our decks up and had them a little bit stronger. But I don't know if that scenario was incredibly difficult, regardless of how we would have built our decks up.
So the way that Rory's describing this is, the base box comes with a campaign of 3 scenarios, right?
3 linked scenarios.
3 linked scenarios you're supposed to do in sequence. Now, the Carnival single scenario deck and the
Curse of the Rougerou.
Curse of the Rougerou are 2 standalone single scenarios that can be played either in between those 3 linked scenarios of a campaign or as a standalone scenario. And within that pack, it describes the rules for doing both of those. So it could be played with base decks that you would start with and then never play those again as a one-shot, or it can be sort of a take a step out of a campaign as like a side quest and play those single adventure decks. I don't know which is the right answer for when to integrate those. We were kind of talking about, is there a pathway to say, here's the best way to progress through these? But it wasn't quite clear.
Sure. So the other thing, the rule book here, this is using the Fantasy Flight style of here's a learn to play with kind of an overview that takes you along. Here are the phases. Here's what you would do. But then they give you a second rule book, which is almost kind of an indexed, it has all of the different major terms and different rules broken out alphabetically. And at first, I liked when Fantasy Flight started doing this. And I think I generally like this. Because I've seen them do this with like Eldritch Horror and the Warhammer 40K Forbidden Stars and a handful of others. I mean, I've probably seen this at least 6 or 7 times now.
I mean, they do it with X-Wing, Star Wars Armada.
Yeah.
And I don't think it works as well there. But here I was pretty happy with it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think this is the worst because...
I find myself constantly referencing the rules reference. And I'm glad that I don't have to go back to the Learn to Play manual. Well,
I agree that you want to reference the rules reference, but I feel like the rules reference is almost too well broken down. I feel like there are, related to monsters, for example, I'm going to find all of the rules for monsters spread out over 4 different entries. And I think that's, like, because whether it's like, oh, I have a question about monster engagement. Well, is it here in the engaged rules? No. Okay, is it here in the monster rules? No. Is it? And I never quite know where to find something. I feel like it's almost too well broken down, and I haven't really experienced that in some of the other rules.
Yeah, I think it's a bit too far granular, and I understand what you're saying there, especially monster engagement. I've also struggled through that. So if they had somehow tied the monster stuff together better,
right,
and other topics as well, like deck building, it can be a bit confusing.
Right. Because like what I've seen them do is I've seen them just have a longer entry and then break stuff down within that longer entry. But then presumably if you're looking for something very specific, it's harder to find because it's not alphabetical. It's within. So I get it. I get that there's a tension there. But yeah, I don't know what else you guys thought about
I kind of agree with Jeremy. I think the index is really useful. It feels like I can figure out the answer to the question fairly fast to the index, where going through the regular rules takes a moment and have to kind of go through a couple different pages on it. So I like the index on this one.
I'll fall in with the minority opinion here that I think this happens several times. The one that comes to mind is looking up attacks of opportunity, so that monsters may get against your characters. So we found ourselves trying to look in that index. All right, let's look under attacks of opportunity. All right, now we have to look under movement. Now we have to look under monster attacks. So exactly what Sean's describing, where we end up flipping through this rules index 3 or 4 times, and in the end, it's ambiguous, and there's that catch-all that says, if it's ambiguous, pick the least advantageous option for the players.
Right.
So a couple times we ran into spending a few minutes trying to figure out what's going on, and sometimes getting to a resolution that's a little fuzzy.
And overall, I don't think, like I said, there's a lot that's intuitive about this game, and especially if you played other Fantasy Flight LCGs, or especially like the Lord of the Rings living card game, because this is a very similar system. I think this is a refinement on that system, but yeah, intuitive, but still, I don't know. I'm sure this will change. I'm sure after I've played this another dozen times, a lot of those questions will go away, but there are a lot of corner cases, especially as scenarios kind of break the rules and do things differently and experiment with how things jump out at you. And that's going to be kind of difficult because there's a lot of cool stuff that the different scenarios of this game does. One scenario is not very similar to another scenario, even within the same campaign. And so we're going to have to be kind of careful about spoiling some narrative stuff and revealing too much about what one scenario might happen to do. But it's certainly an ambitious rule set, I think. But I think it works.
Yeah,
with some effort.
I agree that it works. And, you talked about breaking rules and how the different scenarios do that. I think that's what's really engaging about the system. As you read through these agenda and act cards, the game evolves, which is really interesting for a card game because the text is fixed. We're not applying stickers like a legacy game. We're just reading the same cards, and somehow they've magically fit these rules into the back of a card, basically.
So card quality, because that's obviously the bulk of this game are all the cards. What do you guys think there?
So I'll say fair to Midland. Now, we noticed that the single scenario add-on packs have a slightly different card stock than the cards in the base game. Not a whole bunch of an issue because those cards are not necessarily mixed with the cards from the base game. So it's not like you're trying to shuffle them together and not know which one's on top.
Well, except a couple might get added to a deck as a reward or a penalty.
That's true. So there's those one or two corner cases of this card might end up in someone's deck at some point. But I think the overall quality is fair to middling.
And the same thing happened to the Lord of the Rings game because there are some single deck. I think they're the horror or they're basically previous expansions that they ramped up the difficulty on. And it's the same thing where it's a completely different card quality. It's really weird. It's almost like it's a different core to the card. So like the base game uses like a white core, and then some of the Mythos packs use like a black core. And you could, like, if you look at the sides of the cards, you could be like, oh, it's nice and white versus, oh, it's, dark.
I think if you're a card game player, you've pretty much grown accustomed to this. I remember I had different corner cut Magic the Gathering cards between, I think, 3rd and 4th edition, where they stopped rounding them as much as they used to. Maybe it was second and third.
Second and third.
Oh, excuse me. I'm such a noob.
Yeah.
Beta and revise.
Yep.
So I went ahead and sleeved my set, and I think anyone serious about this game is going to sleeve their copy.
Well, I think that's what Fantasy Flight wants you to do, is they want you to buy some of their Fantasy Flight Arkham Horror, sleeve backs.
Yeah, I went ahead and bought Ultra Pro because
it's funny. I was about to say that I can't see someone sleeving more than just the adventure cards, but then again, I'm looking at Jeremy's copy on the table in front of us, which has absolutely everything sleeved.
Well, I didn't sleeve the tiny mini player cards.
Oh.
So about 5 cards are not sleeved.
Oh, okay.
But even the rules reference cards are sleeved.
I sleeved just tiny player cards. Those are perfect for Fantasy Flight sleeves.
So I will say that one of the things that Rory kind of introduced was to sleeve the player decks with different color backed sleeves to make it easy to keep the player decks separate during sequential adventures during a campaign. So I think that was a great idea. That way you're not, if cards get moved around the table, you know what deck they belong to. Makes it easy for setup and tear down of the game, I think.
Yeah, and I don't really know that you need to even sleeve the scenario cards because they're going to just get put away, and I think they're not going to get as much play as the decks is going to get. I think the decks absolutely need to be sleeved.
Yeah,
but the scenarios, you put them, you play them, you put them back. Like I don't think they're going to get it. I don't think they necessarily need to be sleeved, but I'm looking at Jeremy's completionist box of sleeved cards, and it does look really good.
It does look very pretty.
So as far as the other components, it has just your standard Fantasy Flight thickness cardboard tokens, which I think are pretty solid. And then that's pretty much it. You need something to draw the chaos tokens from. They don't give you that, all right, whatever.
It should have a bag.
Yeah, it should have a bag. So so a lot of people are going to use their crown bags. I have a New Mexico whiskey bag that's yellow and orange that works really well. So the other thing, as far as components go, is the box size. I don't typically care to discuss box size on the podcast, but I'm kind of annoyed that they went this size box. This is the smaller box that they did with the Warhammer 40K Warhammer Conquest LCG that you can't store your cards in necessarily unless you've got a third-party insert, because the box isn't big enough to put the cards on the side. Like Netrunner or Lord of the Rings LCG, like you can store your cards in there. You can't do that with this, and this just drives me crazy. I get why they do it because it's cheaper, but it's also kind of annoying.
So I think if they had combined 2 base sets into how they sold it, you would have ended up with that box size. But I think because they have basically a base set that's a 1 to 2 player, you end up with less cards, so they weren't going to put it in a gigantic box.
I bet it's a similar card count, though, to some of the bigger ones. I mean, they probably save a good $4. I mean, a $4 per unit, and to them, that's a big enough deal.
Yeah, if you buy the base game and the 2 Mythos packs that came out with it, you're totally stuffed.
Yeah.
So you're probably going to buy another base copy just for the extra storage.
Well, and that's the thing, too. I went to just a white long box to store my stuff. And I just feel like that's a lack of marketing for them, because now instead of, at a store or at a con, me carrying around this Arkham Horror box, I'm just carrying around this card box that could be anything. I don't know. They've probably priced it all out, and it's probably most effective for them to go this route.
We haven't seen from the other product lines a storage solution yet. So do you think they're going to sell an accessory later? I mean, they have player mats, they have all kinds of stuff.
So I'll throw out something that another game did. So Star Realms, Legion prints their customized Star Realms sleeves, and basically a long box like you described that's printed in Star Realms art.
Yeah.
So it's possible we could see a third party come out with something like that if Fantasy Flight doesn't.
Yeah, that would be something. So the other thing that is kind of annoying is that your character is one of these tiny cards, and there are locations in this game. So you have these location cards that get set out, and there's some movement rules about you moving from one location to the next. But the game itself is kind of a table hog, and you almost need like a little character on a stand. I almost wish it were a token, and your character could actually stand up, because they just kind of get lost in the shuffle, so to speak.
I swapped in pawns in my set already.
Yeah. I guess they just want you to buy the really expensive Arkham Horror pre-painted miniatures. It's like $300 for like all 40 or something, if those are even still available.
I don't think they sell that any longer.
No?
If they did have a mini set, I would have it.
I agree. I would like to buy that as well.
So somebody mentioned taking the miniatures out of Pandemic Cthulhu might be a reasonable swap in.
Okay. Yeah, it might not be too bad.
The investigators, I think, match up pretty well.
Or maybe some Reaper miniatures. You can find something that works.
Yeah, something.
I agree, though. It is definitely a little bit of a table hog, and it definitely requires some thought on to how you're going to set it up. And I don't want to give any spoilers to the game, but we could have definitely used another table on last night's game.
Yeah, so what's interesting is a certain location might connect to one other location, or it might connect to 2 or 3 locations, and it's kind of hard to get a feel for what connects to where. There are some icons they use, and you almost need to spend some time thinking about how to set it up in like a map form, so that it's a little bit more intuitive. I found a lot of times we'd be looking at like, oh, well, can I go here? Oh, no, I can't go there. This only goes here and here.
That's exacerbated by the fact that you don't really know what the map looks like until you're maybe 2/3 of the way through the scenario,
right.
When all of a sudden every location comes out and the map changes significantly.
Yeah.
So it's hard to anticipate how much space you're actually going to need.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's jump into the meat of the review, the gameplay. So we've kind of addressed some of that in initial thoughts. So let's start with this. How do you guys like to play this game? Do you like to play this solo or at 2-player, 3-player, 4-player? Because I feel like this is the kind of question we kind of usually leave towards the end of a review, and it's just kind of a throwaway, oh, I prefer to this count, whatever. But I feel like that's a really important question here. How do you want to experience this game?
So for me, this is a 2-player game. I picked it up to play with my spouse. She's been enjoying the Cthulhu mythos, and for us, it's a really nice sit down at the end of the day, play it together kind of game.
And go crazy.
Yeah.
And just get your butts handed to you sometimes.
Yeah, we totally get sacked, even at the easy setting.
I started playing it with 3 players. Well, we started with a 3-player, right?
Yeah.
And then I went solo, and I really enjoyed solo play on it. In fact, I would probably have said that solo, I feel like, is the best route on this game. But then last night we played 4-player, and I had a really good time with the 4-player. So I don't know what the player count is, but
yeah.
I feel like it's good at any count.
Yeah, I think it scales well. That's really the short of it.
I played half a dozen different scenarios at 2-player, and I think the 2-player count is really solid. But after playing that 4-player count last night, I was surprised at how well that flowed. I thought it was going to be very clunky and really outstay its welcome. Now, that being said, the time per scenario definitely went up requisite with player count.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that was probably on the table for close to 3 hours.
Well, we had 2 scenarios that was about 5 hours total.
Right.
Yeah.
So we were, and to some extent, the last scenario could have gone longer if we continued to turn a crank. But so I think the player count definitely drove the time per play up. At the 2-player count, I felt like I was getting most of the scenarios done in between 1 and 2 hours.
Okay.
With once both people involved knew how to play the game.
So yeah, I was expecting 4 players to be a hot mess. I was expecting it to not be great, and I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was pretty fantastic at 4. What I thought was interesting was, at least with because we just had the starter characters because we just said, hey, I just want to try this. Let's stress test the game, and it worked out really well. And what was really cool is that you kind of covered each other's weaknesses, and you got to see a lot more synergy than you might see at 2 players or solo. I've also been playing this solo, and I'm really enjoying it. And I'm playing solo one-handed, so one character. I know some people might want to try it two-handed. I think I'll try it eventually, two characters. But what I like about this is it reminds me in some ways of Pathfinder, the adventure card game, which I spent, before Alex and I started playing, a lot of time playing solo. I loved playing it solo, but I hated setting it up. Doing the setup and breakdown for each scenario with one person is so much work. It's such a tremendous amount of work. The setup time here solo is a lot less than in Pathfinder ACG. So I can see myself building a deck for this one investigator, playing this first scenario all the way through, and then building a deck for a second character and playing that one all the way through, and playing basically all the characters through that first core set scenario. Like I can absolutely see myself doing this, because at one player, at solo play, it's probably going to be about an hour and 15, depending on the particular scenario. So I really like it solo, but then I also liked it at 4 players. And I think there's some interesting deck building decisions that you would make solo versus 4 players. Like there are some, like if it's just you and you kind of have to be able to do everything, well, some characters might be better suited for that, number one. But some cards are better knowing, oh, I have to handle investigation when I'm not that good at investigation. So I might want to take these cards that help me. Whereas in a 4-player game, I might say, oh, you know what? I'm just going to min-max. Forget these investigation cards. I'm going to let this person do it. I'm just going to gear up with this other stuff. So interesting decisions, I think, based on the player count.
Yeah, I think single player is going to struggle with low wisdom characters.
Yeah.
Because you just aren't going to be able to investigate and progress the act.
So I agree with what Sean's saying about when you have different player counts, when you do the deck construction in between scenarios, of paying attention to what other people are doing. So it's not just in a sandbox construct a deck. Particularly if this character is in a 2-player game, I may have to pay attention to 2 or 3 things I might be able to do. If I'm in a 4-player game, I need to be really good at one thing. Because when it comes time to do damage to the baddie or succeed in an investigate check that's really difficult, you want the one person in the group to do that, to go do it. So paying attention to build decks as a group, not just individually, I think is a big piece of that.
What I think it boils down to is that you're going to need to buy more core sets.
So yeah, this is the time to get into that. So Jeremy, you just like sat up. You're like, okay, let's do this. I'm ready for this.
Well, I think Rory is just trying to get me to buy more product from his shop.
Well, that's funny.
No, I
know they're in stock.
And they're out of stock everywhere else.
Until I get there, and then they're going out of stock. Yeah, that's something that I think if you're a board gamer and you're coming back to card games like CCGs, LCGs, you might have been accustomed to buying lots of cards in the past, and then you kind of got used to buying a box and having a complete experience. If you're expecting that, I think you're going to be disappointed here. You need to be anticipating the need to buy more and more pieces to this game, including the base box.
Right. So, for example, Netrunner, if you want to build complete decks, you need 3 core sets, because there are most cards that give you the 3 copies you need. Then there's a couple, they only give you 2 copies. And then there's a couple more, they only give you 1 copy. And you're able to run 3. So I have purchased 3 core sets. And at one point, I was even considering purchasing a 4th just because I wanted to have the extra cards so I didn't have to keep swapping out from various decks. I'm kind of used to that, and I knew that going into it, so it didn't bug me as much. It was refreshing when games like Ashes, Rise of the Phoenix Born didn't do that, or Doomtown Reloaded, the ECG, the expandable card game from AEG.
Yep.
When basically they give you all the cards you need. So that was nice, and it was very refreshing. And do I wish Fantasy Flight would do that? Absolutely.
Well, I think it'd be palatable if they sold a player expansion set where it's just player cards, the cards that you need to build the decks to their completion. It's the fact that you're buying all these extra scenario cards and just kind of sitting on them.
Yeah.
And you can't really sell them because nobody really needs those.
There's no market for them. Yeah, that is off-putting. So I do have, in my long box, I've got a stack, a 4-inch stack of cards that's like, oh, well, these are just extra. Am I going to throw them away? Well, no, probably not. So yeah, I mean, I totally get it. And it's something that, at least for me, I'm just like, that's just the price of entry. But I think that you do need to be aware going into this that, you spend $40 or whatever on the core set. It's like, oh, it'll be okay. It'll be fine. You'll get some enjoyment out of it. But if you want the full experience, you're going to want a second core set. You're going to want to get all the Mythos packs. You're going to want to get the big box expansions, because the Mythos packs, mind you, are just scenarios. There's no extra cards for deck construction.
So, and note this is true across all player counts. So even if you just plan on playing solo, you still may end up needing a second core set.
Yeah.
Because you may want 2 copies of a specific card in your deck that only 1 comes in the core set. So now when you start talking about expanding the player count to 3 or 4, you may need more than 2 copies of the core set, upwards of 4 copies of the core set.
Well, it's probably 2 copies per player, because if you're going to use 2 characters that use law cards, you can have 2 named law card in each deck. That's going to require, for 2 players, 4 copies.
So then the question is, how are you supposed to play this game? And when I say that, I don't mean how you play like mechanically, but I mean the meta game of it. I don't know how to play this game, which kind of it makes me only want to play it solo in that sense, because then it's just me and I don't have to worry about anyone else. So I don't know, am I supposed to build my deck and then I show up and we just do a pickup game or try and get through an entire campaign, or there's not a clear indication in the rules, in the scenarios. I mean, they say, oh yeah, you could play the standalone kind of in between, but it just seems weird that it's the same, whether it's between scenario 1 and 2 or it's between scenario 2 and 3. And there's no accounting for why that's different in either case. There's not a clear direction there.
I would tend to want to play this kind of like a legacy game,
right?
With the same group, with the same decks that improve along the same path. And at some point, we're going to have enough adventures out there where there'll be, 8, 10, 12 different scenarios to run through. And if you keep the same group static and you improve your decks at the same pace and you play it like that, I feel like that's going to be the right way to play through many scenarios in this game.
Yeah, I agree with Nick. I think it is almost a legacy format where you're coming back week after week or day after day with the same group, hitting up these new scenarios as they come out and improving your deck. You tend to die a lot. And so you may have to restart your scenarios and actually reset your campaign or, start up a new character. But I think that's actually a positive of this game, not a negative, is that there's many different ways to play it. You can play pickup games where everyone brings their own deck, or you can try and construct something there before you get started. But it definitely takes some time to sit down and think about the deck you're going to put together.
At least for me, it feels like 2 different sides of me are warring here, because I'm totally fine if I say, okay, I'm going to get a group together and we're going to keep building our decks and play these scenarios with, these extra side scenarios thrown in. But then there's the other part of me that has played Magic competitively, that's played Netrunner and things like that wants to just like build a deck and then just have this one deck. And it's like, this is the deck that I bring around, right? This is the deck that, I'll be tinkering with these other ones, but this is the one that if someone's like, hey, let's play a game of Netrunner, boom, I'm ready to go. And I feel like I can't quite do that here, because maybe I've got the deck that I've been soloing. And is that going to be appropriate for, we're going to do a 3-player pickup game of this scenario? Well, how many XP points do you have? Oh, I've got 5 in mine. Oh, it's the starter deck. Oh, I've got 18, or not 18, but I've got like 8 XP points in mine. And so I agree. Like, I don't know. I like being told what to do.
For scale, I think we found with the bunch of 2-player games that I played that you're gaining between 5 to 7 XP in the normal scenarios per scenario.
Okay.
So if you have a deck that's gone through 3 scenarios, you could have as much as 20 XP pumped into that deck, which would be play way different than a starter deck.
Right.
So there's actually a part of the rules reference here called standalone mode.
Yeah.
That references exactly what you're talking about, Sean. And if you're playing with a 0 to 9 experience deck, it recommends adding 0 additional random weakness cards. Whereas if you're playing with a 10 to 19 experience deck, you should add an additional random basic weakness to your deck. So I think there is a way to do this, and that's by incorporating more of these weakness cards, because it's going to handicap you as you get these more beneficial cards.
And see, I wasn't quite sure what that meant. Like, is that what you're just supposed to do, period? Or is that what... Yeah, I don't know. Because I saw that, and I was like, okay, that makes sense, but I couldn't tell if that was... But you're not supposed to do that in campaign play.
You shouldn't be doing this in the campaign.
Okay.
So I think that's their way to have you scale down your 20-point deck to play with people that have a starter deck.
Yeah.
Is to add weaknesses in there. It's probably worth explaining the mechanic of the weakness cards here. So the weakness cards that are inserted in your deck, and there are 2 in the starter deck construction, one specific to each character and one random basic weakness. Whenever you draw them, they immediately come into play and do something debilitative.
Right.
So you don't have a choice not to play them when they come up. So in a 30 card deck with 2 cards in there, you're probably going to see at least one each game you play.
Yeah.
And if they come at the wrong time, they can be really, really bad.
They're a pain.
Yeah, it's the most devastating part of the gameplay usually. Either that or some big nasty spawns on top of you.
So the scenarios, without talking any specifics, a lot of them will include, say, 14 location cards, and at the beginning, they'll say randomly choose 10 of these.
Yeah.
And then in the setup, it'll direct you how to set those up. What this does is give some replayability if you haven't played the scenario too many times. You might see cards you've never seen before based on which ones were randomly inserted. So each time you play scenario 2 out of the base deck, it's not going to play identically the same based on which location cards, which have different abilities at those locations that you'll encounter. So I imagine that's going to be a trend that continues with the other Mythos packs that come out and the other expansions. So you're going to have some replayability based on not the player cards, based on how the scenario sets itself up. So I think that's a plus.
Well, and the fact that I can have played the very first scenario like 6 times, and it's still an interesting puzzle every time because I'm playing with a different investigator or I'm playing a different player count. Because that one is probably the one with the least variability.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that one you're just kind of on rails more or less. But for the most part, so here's what I did. The first couple times I didn't beat it, and I kept saying, "Oh, I got to beat it. I got to beat it," not realizing that if you could do that if you want, right? But maybe you just want to see what happens if you don't beat it, because there is a result if you don't win.
There's a resignment and a loss.
Right. And so that will have an effect, that there'll be some story element that happens, and that will have some sort of game effect for the next scenario and possibly a later scenario. And so it's kind of interesting if you want to look at it as, oh, well, I'm going to save every point I get, like a video game, or like an old video game, oh, I can't save, and you just, I'm going to see what happens this time through the campaign.
And I would urge players not to sit down and read the cards right away.
Oh, yeah.
Let those be a mystery, and don't read the campaign book, because that's where the resolutions to the outcomes of each individual scenario are kept.
So also note there's multiple win scenarios.
Right.
So not just the resign and the loss things that might happen. Once you win, you may be presented with a choice at the end of the scenario. Do you do A, B, or C? And then it'll have you note that down to your campaign log, which might have an effect on a later adventure. So there's multiple ways to win the scenarios too.
Let's talk about the narrative aspect of this, because that's something, we've kind of been talking about mechanics and how the game plays out. But if we're not talking about the theme, I think we're missing something here. So does this feel like a narrative experience?
I can definitely say from last night's game that we played that it was, as far as a story, it is, you just get so wrapped up into it. And I was so stressed out last night and during the game. And it's not a bad stress. This is an amazing game stress, because, you get into the stories and you get the locations open, and you're as you're progressing through and you're taking damage, it's really thematically, I think it's excellent. I think all the text-driven cards that come up on it are all written very well. I think that it really kind of gets you totally absorbed into what's going on, and you just feel like you're in an H.P. Lovecraft story.
Yeah, I gotta totally agree with Rory. When I sit down to play this, there are moments where you push away from the table before you reach into that chaos bag, because something bad's gonna happen to you. And I've tried to bring my thematic experience up a notch by playing creepy music, like using the Diablo soundtrack.
Nice.
Which is really got some creepy sounds.
Yeah.
And then adding the Stonemaier token trilogy. I picked up the resource crate from I think it's the food crate.
Okay.
And then if you get the horror box, it's got brains, it's got hearts,
yeah,
blood vials, books, which are great for counters on your spellcaster cards. It's got little clue tokens that are like magnifying glasses. So it just really, really brings it together.
In general, I agree. However, I will say that playing through the very first scenario at like the 4th playthrough,
yeah,
we tended to gloss over the flavor text, because at least in the game we played last night, 3 of the 4 people had played that intro scenario at least 2 previous times.
Right.
So when normally you'd be getting engrossed in the story, in this particular case, we're like, all right, the first flavor text, all right, let's get to the turns. So maybe the flavor text fades into the background if you're repeating the same scenario over and over again.
Yeah, I definitely want to spend at least that first time really immersed in the story. And then it becomes just a puzzle of, okay, how well do I execute this? But I think that's really incredible. I think it's incredible that the mechanics alone are really strong and that the narrative element is really strong.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like an RPG. Almost.
I think you can take it there.
Yeah.
If you do a little role playing with your character, you step into those shoes, you can have a more narrative experience with this game, which is really surprising for me as it's just a card game.
Yeah. Well, like you were saying before, I think you were saying at the beginning how it's just amazing how all of these different location cards and these different monsters that pop up and the cards you play all form a story, because it doesn't feel like it would form a story. So like when I played the Lord of the Rings LCG, yeah, each scenario was referencing, something. I mean, usually it was something between The Hobbit and the Fellowship of the Ring, but it didn't feel as immersive. I mean, things would happen and you'd get stuck in Mirkwood and a bunch of spiders would come at you, but it didn't feel particularly immersive like this one does. Right. And so for me, I have no desire to play the Lord of the Rings LCG. Even though I really love what it does from a deck construction standpoint, I feel like it's probably stronger in terms of deck construction, even if you take out all of the billion more expansions it already has. But the gameplay here in Arkham and the narrative in Arkham is so much stronger that I think I'm done with Lord of the Rings.
Well, and I thought in last night's game too, that we had to kind of all back up because we've all played the first scenario. Probably all of us have played it 4 times at least.
Yeah.
And then we had Jeff that had not played yet. So we're like, well, we need to back up and take this like it's our first time.
Yeah.
But then it was so great seeing how into it Jeff was, that it like kind of drew me into the story again, even though I know the story, but I just got redrawn back in because Jeff was so excited about it, and I think that's just a sign of a really good game.
Yeah, I've introduced this to new gamers, to people that have been board gaming for a while. And so far, everyone I've played it with has really enjoyed the narrative elements and gotten engrossed in the storylines.
It kind of reminds me of the narrative element that's injected into Mansions of Madness 2nd.
Okay.
I don't know if any of you guys have played that yet, but it has an app that basically walks you through similar conditions that the act and the agenda cards do here. Mm-hmm. So it really felt like you were getting into it as long as you took the pause to read the flavor text as the stuff flips over.
Okay.
So if you just flipped it over and looked right to the mechanical changes and you skip the flavor text, then you miss out on that. So I would strongly suggest you take the time to flip it over, step back and read the flavor text.
Absolutely.
So you actually get immersed in that same thematic environment.
Yeah, and going back to the player count, that's where I feel like the solo is really good because you can just really take your time and no one's waiting for you to take a turn, and you can really immerse yourself into the story solo.
Well, I felt so alone. Like looking back on it now, like playing solo, you really feel that sense of horror because you're all alone. Yeah. Like not just on the board with just your one investigator, but it's like, oh man, I'm enduring this alone. It was a very different feel than our 4-player games last year. But good. I liked it.
Well, and if you're playing as like Agnes, who's the waitress or the sorcerer class, you have no wisdom, you have no fight, you're just really exposed. And she has hardly any dexterity too. It's going to be brutal.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to playing through this first campaign with different character builds. Taking because have any of us played anything of Dunwich?
I've incorporated some of the weakness cards into my deck, and that's actually something I want to talk about because even the bad stuff feels good when it's new, right? Yeah. And so with the big box expansion and even with the Mythos packs, you sometimes get a new weakness card that the game will either introduce via the scenario or it's one of the basic random weaknesses that you add to your deck. And that's really where that Lovecraftian feel comes from, right? It's that fear of the unknown. Every time you reach for that treachery deck, nothing good is going to happen.
Nothing.
All right, so one comment over in the guild, Megan Naxer says, let me say up front that the mythos of H.P. Lovecraft is not my cup of tea at all. I do have plans for reading some of the literature one day, but every time a Cthulhu game comes out, I roll my eyes. A good friend brought Arkham Horror over, and I must say, of all the Lovecraft games, this one had me a little interested to see how it worked. We played a 4-player game of the intro scenario, and it was a ton of fun. With only one play, I think that it's probably about all I can say about it. With only one play, I think that's probably all I can say about it, but that alone is a big deal for me. So much so that I quickly picked up a copy of the Lord of the Rings card game and some adventure packs and am loving it, both solo and 2-player. So thanks, Arkham Horror, for introducing me to a Lovecraft game that deserves more than an eye roll and for giving me the final push to add Lord of the Rings to my shelf. All right, so here at the Dukes of Dice, we have a 6-point scale where we rate games. A 1 is poorly designed but playable, not necessarily fun. Anyone going to give this a 1?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No.
A 6 is an all-time favorite that's a contender for the top 10. So who wants to give their final thoughts and ratings first?
I'll preface this with currently I own 1 copy of the base set and the 2 Mythos packs. So as it plays, as it sits, I would give it a 4. This could easily go up to a 5 for me once I get 1 or 2 extra copies of the base set and can fully do the deck construction.
So a 4 is a good game, worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the duchy.
Right. And it could even be more frequently never turn down a play of it at the 5 mark if I get a couple more base sets.
Okay.
So it's going to stay in my collection. I know that. But whether or not it bumps up further is going to be based on how I feel about adding more base sets to it.
Yeah, I want to first start out and point out that this is ranked overall number 60 on the BGG.
Yeah, it's
And
shot up.
It's number 10 in thematic games.
Oh, yeah.
And number 1 in customizable.
Interesting.
This is a already popular game.
Yeah.
And as more and more people play it, it's just going to get more and more popular. For me, the dings are definitely the cost of entry. You know, if you want that complete experience, yeah, you can start with the $40 box and see if it's for you. But if you're going to get into this game and it's going to be a lifestyle game for you, you're going to spend a lifestyle game budget on this game. So I think that's a caveat. This is maybe not a board game.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I'm coming down to a 5. It's a great game. I'll rarely turn down a play of it. Anytime somebody wants to try it out, I'm going to pull it out, ready to go. But I want that thematic experience. It's not something that I want to play at a place where there's a lot of people around, a lot of chatter, because I want to be able to read that flavor text and really kind of get into the mood of getting scared.
Yeah.
You know, I think I'm going to give it a 5. And I think that the only reason I wouldn't give it a 6 is because I don't have enough plays on it. But I think it's an excellent game. I can't wait to play it again. It's on my mind after we played it last night. I thought about that scenario throughout the day, and that's just to me a sign of a really great game. When you think about it the next day and you try to figure out what you're going to do to get through it or what you're going to do to win. And then when Jeff calls and says he wants to start a group up on it, that's always a good positive sign for the game as well. I think that I kind of agree with the getting into it on a price point is challenging. You know, I'm a retailer, and I tell people to buy it, that go ahead, buy it, try it. And if you enjoy it, I think you're probably going to want to come back for another core set. And I think that is something that I wish they would add more to the box initially, so you don't have to kind of nickel and dime so many sets on it. Because even on my end, it's just it's like I wish they had added a little bit more. But it's a great game. It's one of my favorite games for 2016. It's up there. So I'm going to give it a 5.
Very cool. So yeah, this was actually my number 5 game of 2016 when we did our top 10. And I'm going to give it a 5. A great game. We'll rarely turn down to play of it. From the get-go, right away, I bought 2 boxes because I'm just like, well, this is what you do. And I figured I was going to like it. I had heard enough from people about it. They compared it to the Lord of the Rings game. I enjoy the Cthulhu Lovecraft universe that Fantasy Flight has built. I mean, it's kind of comfortable at this point. I've played enough games in it, and I enjoy it. I've read, I'd probably say, not quite half of Lovecraft's work. So I'm a fan of his work, although it's still very different from what Fantasy Flight has created. But it's still there. Anyway, I think this game is great, and I'm excited to play the solo. I feel like this primarily will be a solo game for me. Not to say that I don't want to play it at 2 or 4. I just don't know how often I'm going to have the opportunity to play 4-player in a campaign setting. Maybe 2. Raquel liked her. She played this twice. I think she's played this the once. I think she liked her one play. I don't know that's necessarily a 2-player game that she and I will continue to play, though. So I feel like this will be solo for me primarily, and I'm excited for that. I'm very excited for that. It's going to kind of scratch that Pathfinder itch that I don't want to play solo because too much setup. So, yep, that's going to do it. So 5 from me, 5 from Rory, 5 from Jeremy, and a 4, but we'll see from Nick. So this week we're taking a look back in our Dukes Double Take at episode 77, Bards Against Humanity. where we reviewed Shakespeare, and I think our double take then was Euphoria. So that makes sense. Bards Against Humanity, kind of dystopian theme, and Shakespeare, obviously. So this was published by Astari, designed by Hervé Regal, and this was an action selection game, I think. I remember it. And it was a fine game. I gave it a 3. It didn't strike a chord with me, and I didn't see myself wanting to play it much more. Alex gave it a 4, but he said just barely. The bonuses or the pluses were it's easy to teach, has clean mechanics, and a very approachable theme. And I enjoyed the theme. I mean, I like Shakespeare. I've read Shakespeare when I haven't had to in school. So it's, every now and then I'll go back and read some plays. I also like the Star Wars in Shakespearean style. Have you guys seen that? Why are you shaking your head, Jeremy? This is an audio podcast. That doesn't register. Have you not seen it?
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh my God, I've got like 2 of them upstairs. They're amazing. It's like the Empire Doth Strike Back or something like that.
Doesn't sound interesting.
It's amazing. You read it, like you read Yoda in Shakespearean and iambic pentameter, because it's all written in iambic pentameter, right?
So you like Star Trek episodes where they're
Star
just...
Wars.
I know.
Oh.
But do you like Star Trek where they're just acting out Shakespeare on the holodeck? Yeah,
so this is what we talked about on this last episode, how much I love the intersection of Shakespeare and geek culture. And you haven't heard Shakespeare until you've heard it in the original Klingon, the quote from Star Trek 6. Takba, takbe. This is all stuff I said in that episode. That's Klingon for to be or not to be.
I'm happy for you, but it's not for me.
Picard throws out a lot of Shakespeare quotes in there.
Yeah. Well, Patrick Stewart was a Royal Shakespearean actor. So, yeah, I like Shakespeare a lot. And this was a game I thought I was going to like because I really liked the theme, but it just wasn't that interesting to me. There is a new expansion called Shakespeare Backstage that offers new actors, new objectives, new costumes, and an innovative stage set that might all add something to it. I would play this again. It was a 3, right? So I'm not going to be like, oh, this game's terrible, I'll never play it again. But it just didn't do much for me. Now, none of you have played this, right?
That's right.
Correct.
All right. Well,
it's in the library, but it actually might go to the garage sale.
Well,
because it hasn't gotten a single play.
No, keep it in the library. Keep it in the library.
You might play it. Are you going to sell your copy?
Yeah, I'm going to sell my copy. I don't want to keep it. So over to the guild, Jake Bach says, and about Shakespeare, we played it some, and that's about as much as I remember about it. Seemed fun at the time, but apparently no real lasting power in our circle. All right, flip side, Jimmy DM90, he says, it's my second favorite game of all time. I'm sure the theme has something to do with it, but I really like the recruiting, plus choosing who to rest and how many actions to bid. And yeah, there's some very interesting actions in this game because you're activating certain characters, you're recruiting new ones that you can use, but then you're only able to reuse a certain amount in the next round. So a lot of this game should have worked for me, but for whatever reason, it didn't. As far as my score, I'm going to keep it at a 3. Game is okay, not exciting. We'll play in the right situation. I mean, like I said, I'm getting rid of it this coming week in our Gamers Garage sale. So it's fine. So that's Shakespeare. So this week we're going to be discussing games to end the night with. But first, a quick word about our sponsor. One of the favorite Kickstarter fulfillments I ever received was Orleans Deluxe from Tasty Minstrel Games. And now Tasty Minstrel has a brand new Orleans expansion called Orleans Invasion. This is the first large expansion for this award-winning game, and there are 6 scenarios inside, some new buildings, and several new event cards. What's really nice about these expansions is that they're modular, so you can kind of pick and choose what kind of experience you want to add. So for example, the Prosperity expansion adds some new buildings and introduces the Carpenter, a new craftsperson. In the Invasion scenario, players have to work cooperatively in order to fend off an invasion and fulfill some personal goals to win. The Duel is a scenario for 2 players in which both opponents have to compete for 4 different objectives to win. In addition, there's 3 solo challenges, the Dignitary, Capital Vierzon, and Traveling Salesman. So lots of stuff in this expansion. I can't wait to dig into all of these because this is a fantastic game and this is a fantastic expansion. So check out Orleans Invasion at your local friendly game store or your favorite online retailer. And for all of Tasty Minstrel's other fantastic games, go to playtmg.com. So I think we were just kind of chatting in the Slack group, and Jeremy, this was your idea, right? What are some games that we like to end the night with?
Yeah, so we were playing Captain Sonar after Alex's retirement party.
Okay.
I think we were calling it. And it struck me as we always play Captain Sonar at the end of the night.
Yes.
It is a finisher, right? It's never a game we start with or we pull out in the middle. I think that 8-player count is kind of hard to achieve in that way.
Sure.
But it just really struck me as something that, man, this is fun to finish the night with. And it's a nightcap. It puts a little happy ending to your game night.
So
I totally agree with you. It is a great game to end the night with.
a happy ending to any game night.
Yes,
is
indeed.
awesome.
You're terrible people.
So the other nice thing about Captain Sonar at the end of the night is that Empire Board Game Library's general volume has decreased where part of playing Captain Sonar can be done. So if you haven't played Captain Sonar, it involves both teams sort of listening to what the other team is doing. So if there's a lot of other stuff going on, you're going to miss what's happening.
Right.
So it really fits being something where everything is kind of winding down. You know, most folks are getting ready to leave.
Well, it's casual. You know, you're not thinking hard. It's just kind of fun. It's a team game. One of those things that you're not going to normally get a play of unless it's a special situation.
Makes total sense.
So are there any other games that spring to mind that are maybe a go-to game?
So the one that I suggested was Fuji Flush, just because I feel like regardless of the player count for slightly larger numbers, 5 to 8, I think you can play and still have fun with that one. It's real quick, real easy, and it's kind of just a quick 5 or 10 minute sort of nightcap. And it's also a super easy teach. So if you have people who haven't played it before, you can teach it in a couple of minutes, even if you're already kind of burned out. So I think it works great for that sort of role.
I'm going to have to go with Power Grid.
What?
Oh my gosh.
For all occasions. And that's for Matthew.
I love Power Grid.
Yeah,
it's
Power
a great
Grid's-
game, but
yeah, I
it's
can't
not
win
one
it.
I want to finish the night with.
So Rory, at like 11:55, we'll bust it out and see how long you want to stay and watch us play Power Grid.
If Matt Walker's around, no problem.
So for a long time, this isn't one I actually have played in a while, and I'm kind of disappointed. But for a long while, the Resistance or the Resistance Avalon was a good end of the night game. And it's kind of interesting because that one ratchets up the tension. Either you're trying to figure out who's lying or you're trying to lie and not get caught. And it just seems like a weird one because a lot of times you're wanting to kind of unwind with some of these games. But for whatever reason, it's always been a good one to end nights with. And sometimes it might, because it's quick enough, right? Depending on the player count, it's maybe 30, 40 minutes. So there's still enough meat there without being a 2-hour, 2.5-hour game and without being like a super crunchy, thinky Euro, but you could still have some interesting decisions and you're lying to each other. But it doesn't come out as much anymore. And I need to change that because it's still in my top 10. Like I love the Resistance Avalon. Just love it. We should play that soon, actually.
I love lying to my friends.
Yeah.
You know.
I'd rather play Resistance with all the expansions, which is the same thing, just because the theme is cooler for me.
Okay.
But let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
let's
think
do it.
along those lines too, Spyfall is another good one. And Spyfall 2 just came out.
So
I've heard some good stuff about that.
I'm really bad at Spyfall. Like really, really bad at Spyfall. I only played it. I played it 4 times at Dice TerrorCon 2 years ago, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I should be good at this. Like this should be." I am really bad, and I haven't played it since because I'm so bad at it. I don't know.
It's one to get to the table. Give it a try.
I don't know if I'd call that a nightcap kind of game, though. I played it probably a couple months ago, and I was the spy, and I won it, but not due to my own skill, due to other people not necessarily playing it so great. So people asking questions that clearly they shouldn't have been asking if they were somebody who was not a spy.
Someone in the know.
Right. Someone in the know shouldn't have been asking those questions. So it didn't feel like a good nightcap game for me. That seems like more you need everyone kind of on the ball paying attention to that one.
So what is it? What are the characteristics you're looking for then in an end of night game?
So for me, it needs to be a quick turnaround so that you can play it and play it and play it as people sort of drop out and head home. That way, not everybody's always ready to go at the same time. So maybe you start at 7 and then you're down to 6. So games like One Night Ultimate Werewolf come to mind.
Yeah.
As people drop out, it's okay.
Yeah, just take out a character and then you're good to go.
I think it needs to be a game that you can teach extremely quickly, very light rule set. So people at the end of the night don't want to sit there and pay attention to learn a new game. This should be something very light, very quick, very easy. Like you said, you're not looking for a big crunchy Euro. You're looking for something you can explain very quickly. Hopefully, a good percentage of people have already played it, and you can get into throwing cards on the table very quickly.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's something that's easy to teach. Like Love Letter comes to mind. It's quick. You can get it on the table and with 5 minutes explanation on it, and I think that makes a great Into the Night game.
You're kind of obsessed with Deluxe Love Letter.
Love Letter's good.
Yeah. No, it's good.
It's
but you're
good.
like obsessed with Deluxe Love Letter. Like obsessed with it.
I don't know if I'm obsessed with it.
So
I mean,
this
it is next to my bed, but I don't know if that means anything.
Wait, really? Is it really? Or are you just
No,
joking? Okay. All right.
The question
It is a great game, though.
is it in stock?
Yes, it is in stock. So I'll tell you a quick little story on Love Letter. One of the reasons I love Love Letter so much is that when I fly quite a bit for whatever reason, and it's my go-to game to have in my pocket when I'm on an airplane. So I can go get on an airplane, I can sit down, 2 other people, and total strangers, and pull out Love Letter, and it makes for the funnest flight ever. Because it's 2 random people that I'm never going to see again that, for the most part, have no gaming experience whatsoever. And it just really works perfect in an airplane.
That's cool. I wish I was courageous enough to be like, hey, let's play a board game.
Yeah,
Because
great.
flying is super boring.
Yeah. I usually sleep. I just like to sleep on the plane.
Not if you're sitting next to me.
headphones and XCOM on my Android.
So what's interesting, I think would be an excellent end of the night game would be Codenames, because same thing, you can even have people just drop off mid-round, right? Like if you got like 6 or 7, 8 people, whatever, you could just be like, oh, I got to go. And the teams are still fairly equal. But I feel like at least at Empire, Codenames is a starter.
Yeah, I totally feel the same way. The group I play with in my house sometimes, we always start with code names.
Yeah.
Never finish with code names. For some reason, that game is a starter.
And I can't say why.
I mean, it meets all the criteria we just talked about.
Yeah.
But I agree. It's never really come out as let's tap off the night with Codenames Pictures. It's never what ends up coming out. But frequently we've done, well, let's start a game of Codenames, and as people come in, they join teams. And then when we finish the game, we go, all right, now we got 8 people. Let's break into 2 groups of 4.
Yeah. Let's head over to the guild, see what they have to say.
So BJ from Board Game Gumbo says, on most game nights, we have enough players to split up into 2 or 3 games. Later, when the numbers start dwindling, we throw in a game like Dead Last or Deception to get the group together. Or play an easy, fun game like Fuji Flush. I think Grant Rodiek's Farmageddon would work well here. It's quick to learn, easy to play, some take that, and a lot of laughs. That's what I'm looking for to close out the night.
Okay, so this is from Tiger Mom mentions, a fun end of the night game we recently discovered, Why First? What a crazy game. It makes you think that you have control and can math out the game. What you really need to do is just go with the flow. It's fun and fast.
So yeah, Why First is from Pegasus Spiel, and it's apparently a racing game. I remember watching a video on this. It looked pretty interesting. So cool.
All right, from Megan Naxer. My preference here is for something light and silly that is great for a few laughs and supports enough players for everyone to come together at the end. Instead of one large game groups, I have several smaller game groups post-move, so this doesn't apply much anymore. Some favorites include Camel Up, Fuji Flush, or any cards with numbers game really, Herbaceous, though not as silly, still light and fun, Ra, Deep Sea Adventures, and my number 1 is a bunch of Japanese characters I can't read, translated as Everyone Does Not Come Out. You probably already heard me talk about this one somewhere on the guild, but in case you missed it, this one is another push your luck game with a big twist. Find me at Origins and we'll play it.
Jeff Epner says, we have quite a few night enders that we enjoy. Similar to those above, we are usually looking for something light, fun, and social. So here's our top 5. Number 1, and Jeff, by the way, come on, buddy. We do top 6s around here. But anyway, number 1, Secret Hitler. This game hits the spot for a social deduction game. While the theme isn't for everyone, we haven't had someone walk away from the game not having fun. I guess everyone loves calling others fascists. I'll leave that one alone. Number 2, Rhino Hero. Who doesn't love sacking crap and watching it tumble? With a few drinks, this game is liquid gold. So crap and liquid gold. I'll leave that alone too. All right, Jeff, you're 2 for 2.
Like Goldschlager?
Sure.
I'm thinking of those commercials with macaroni and cheese.
Number 3, Codenames. We talked about this here. The spiel winner speaks for itself. It's a classic that most people buy before leaving the house. For sale. Oh yeah, that's an excellent one.
For sale is huge.
Yeah, for sale is fantastic. So he says this has been a recent ad. It's fun, light, and provides good tension. People are always on edge when they flip that card, hoping they didn't go too high. Rory, do you have copies of this for sale? For sale?
I don't. It's actually hard to get.
Is it?
Yeah, and it's a great game too. I looked at that and I was like, that is a perfect end of the night game.
Yeah, I'm realizing I don't own it, and I need to own it because it's awesome. Crokinole, one of my favorite dexterity games. Drinks definitely make it even more interesting. This is also the moment I flip the table when it goes poorly. I actually kickstarted the Crokinole board that was on like a month ago or so. So yeah, I like Crokinole. And then honorable mention Diamonds. That's usually been a starter too.
Yeah, I don't see it as a closer for some reason, but it is an excellent game.
Oh yeah, absolutely love Diamonds.
I think it deserves to be better than an honorable mention.
And then he says, not a board game, but Rock Band 4. We play a ton of this at the end of the night and shamelessly buy an infinite amount of songs. I used to play a ton of Rock Band.
I used to play a ton of that game too. My problem was at some point, they started removing songs you had already bought because they lost the license for them.
Oh,
in the Rock Band 2-3 time frame.
Yeah.
So you had bought a song pack, and then one day you log in, and all of a sudden that song's not there because they didn't pay for the license the next year. So that was enough to peeve me to not go back to that game.
Yeah, that's pretty rough. I haven't played in a while, so I haven't actually gone back and looked what songs they don't have.
So when you load your song list, you'll be disappointed.
Yeah, because we bought a lot. Like we bought a lot from 2 to 3.
I really liked Rock Band The Beatles.
Oh yeah,
That was
super
excellent.
good.
Yeah. But I haven't touched any of those guitar games since the last generation of consoles.
Yeah.
So Sylvan Lacroix says, it's always fun to have our go-to fillers. You know those games that are sure bet to end the night? No rules to learn, quick, simple fun, that most of the time gets a second play since it's so short. In our group, those games are Dead Man's Draw, For Sale, King Domino, and Sushi Go. I love Sushi Go, King Domino, and For Sale, but I haven't played Dead Man's Draw.
Well, if you want to see a review of King Domino, you can go to our YouTube channel because that just went up this last week.
I like Sushi Go a lot too. I think it fills that role really well.
So what's really interesting is whenever you're like, okay, look, I can only play a game for the next 20 minutes or so. What can we do? And then you wind up staying an extra hour playing like 5-10 minute games.
That's what Captain Sonar does.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. All right. Well, let's wrap up this episode. But before we do, we have some runners up to naming this episode. And a bunch of Shakespeare quotes or Shakespeare references, which I like. So Neil Hoffman suggested Taming of the Friendly Shoggoth, which makes a lot of sense because Friendly Shoggoth is a staple of the Dukes of Dice, and at least in the last couple months, although he's
been oddly absent.
He
lately.
has been absent. Have you guys noticed that whenever Alex is around, the Friendly Shoggoth isn't? And then when the Friendly Shoggoth is around, Alex is not here. That's interesting.
You know, coincidence doesn't necessarily imply causality.
Okay, that's definitely true. Of course, a reference to Taming of the Shrew. Steve O'Rourke, the name father, said, parting is such sweet horror. BJ from Board Game Gumbo, Shoggoth in Love, because who doesn't love the Gwyneth Paltrow and Ray Fiennes movie? Is it Ray Fiennes? Was that the guy in Shakespeare in Love? Ray Fiennes? Wasn't it Fiennes? Okay, everyone stop looking at me weird.
Sounds good.
Jonathan Dodd, Star-Crossed Horrors. Always got to be careful with that, horrors. And Jimmy DM90, Lady Macabre.
My personal favorite.
Well, Lady Macbeth is one of my favorite characters of all time. I mean, for someone who likes, bad guys, Lady Macbeth is like the quintessential bad guy. So that's our top 6, but we have a couple honorable mentions. Duke Alex chimed in all the way on the other side of the world with Cthulhu, wherefore art thou, Cthulhu? I like that. And then can't get enough Cthulhu, so Othulu will play on Othello. So good job, Alex. Way to contribute something to the show while you're gone. All right, so that's going to do it. Hey, guys, I appreciate you helping out. This was fun, kind of interesting, different change with 4 of us.
Yeah, it's been a bit busy talking over each other.
No, I think we did. I think we did good.
It was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
I had a great time.
So this is kind of what we do, at the shop at the end of the night or after we put a game away. So it's just kind of interesting to kind of not put us all in front of microphones. So, yeah.
I'll fill in whenever you need.
Okay. Just read the Slack messages and anyone watch The Office when it was on? So when Pam and Jim are getting married, spoiler alert, Pam is sending out invitations and Meredith is like, oh yeah, I'm not going to RSVP. Pam's like, well, I need you to RSVP. That's just she's like, oh, I'll be there. I'll show up. Don't worry about it. And she's like, but I need you to RSVP. It's also when you'll select, chicken or beef. And Meredith's like, no, I'll just text you the day of, let you know what I'm in the mood for. So that's like you, Rory. You're like all the information goes out on Slack. You're like, oh, just tell me where I'm going to be, when I need to be there, etc.
So I will say we had quite a pool going on of whether or not Rory would show up on time / how late.
I was on time.
Yeah, you were.
You were, which made us think it wasn't you ringing the doorbell.
I did request the red carpet to be rolled out, and I did not see that.
There were flower petals, but it was dark.
So, Sean, is there a special salve to use for all these spider bites that I got?
Did you get some? Because they're everywhere down here.
It's a bit of a dungeon, yeah.
It really is. That's why we call it the Dungeon of the Duchy.
Very thematic for talking about Cthulhu. I was expecting a tentacle to come from one of these crawl spaces.
And because there's exposed dirt. There's like old pipes that are like braced up by like wood beams and stuff. Like it's pretty creepy down here.
Just don't disturb the asbestos.
Yeah, no, that's true. All right, well, that's going to do it then for episode 129, Much Cthulhu About Nothing. Thanks again to Jake Bach for that awesome title. So until next time, this is Sean.
And Nick.
And Jeremy.
And Rory.
And let's do it all together, everyone. Hail Hydra! Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on February 2nd, 2017. Our theme music is provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out Dicetowernetwork.com. And for all of the latest in the Duchy, go to dukesofdice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to Guild members Jeff Epner and Jeff Rademacher for production assistance. Thanks to our sponsors, Tasty Minstrel Games and Meeple Realty. Check out all their awesome titles at playtmg.com. And for high-quality board game inserts, check out meeplerealty.com. Think inside the box. We'll see you back here next week. Until then, as Alex would say, game on!